Hi, everybody. I'm Peyton. This is Joseph. We are here from Oasis Church Chicago, and we are bringing stories of hope.
Today we sit down with Tyrone Redic Jr. as he shares a powerful message of hope in today's climate. I hope you guys can enjoy and take a lot from it. Well, hey, welcome, church. We're doing Stories of Hope here in a different setting. We're here with Tyrone Redic Jr., who works in the hospitality industry here in Chicago, as well as, I think, a couple Lululemon ads here and there. We're going to just interview him on how life has been recently for him during quarantine and the current events that have been going on, and just gauge his thoughts and hear kind of his story of hope.
Well, it's so good to see you in person as well. It's been great to see anyone in person
Thank
these
God
days.
for phase 3.
Yeah. But I'm sure, as everyone knows, hospitality is such a big part of Chicago and just our industry here. What has it been like during this coronavirus time working in this industry?
It's been super awkward, if I can be completely frank. The hospitality business is built around people.
Mm-hmm.
It's built around people, and it's built with the idea that we interact with other people, right?
Yeah.
Right.
For me, my definition of hospitality is really how you make people feel. So if you don't get to interact with people, the business of hospitality is almost dead, quote.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it's also forced the world of hospitality to have to change and innovate, which we're very much have been overdue, to be completely frank.
Right.
I think if I look at industry in whole, the world of hospitality, restaurants, hotels, they're sort of have these antiquated practices that reform has been needed, and now we're forced to do so. And so going into it initially, I was like, oh my gosh, my world is crumbling. But then I realized there was an opportunity to sort of rebuild what my world looked like. So.
Right. I feel like I've seen that a lot, at least here in Chicago. Like, our city's built on hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
Chicago runs on restaurants and hotels.
Yeah.
So I've just seen, even like in my local neighborhood, restaurants get innovative and kind of change the way they do things, the way they deliver to people, cater to people, and some of it even like turned into markets.
Yeah.
Like, it's wild.
It's so true.
Is there anything you guys have been doing?
Yeah, I think like if
Specifically
we look at
for-
interaction, right? Usually a restaurant is like you come in, you sit down, you order your food, you
Right.
eat, and then you get up and leave. How do we do that? How do we find a way to make people feel special
Right.
without having as many touch points as we traditionally do in our restaurant space? And so there have been all kinds of like unique things that we've looked at through innovation or innovative practices. This idea of seamless dining, right? Which is a completely different world. Finding a way to leverage technology to make our world a little bit easier. Different certification practices for restaurants and hotels that make our consumers feel more comfortable.
For sure.
We've embraced that idea. And then just looking at the overall restaurant experience. And so for me, I've taken that last word experience and said, let's drive that home, right? Because if your restaurant or whatever it is that you're doing in the world of hospitality is just about a person coming to sit, eat, and get up and leave, I think you've already failed.
Yeah.
So let's try to figure out what this idea of experience looks like.
Right.
And let's find a way to do it for a limited capacity once we go forward into this sort of phase of opening. And so if I got 50 people that I could interact with at a certain time, how can I make that the most impactful experience? How can I get super creative in what that looks like? And how can I yet interact with people even though I'm not sitting right across from them?
Yeah, that's so wild to think about.
Yeah. Well, and I think especially even as being the church for people and, obviously being there for people in that way, I think we've been seeing it so much, and there's such a correlation between the hospitality factor because we try to be hospitable as the church for people coming in too. Do you think it's kind of changed maybe your mission or your vision around how you can serve others?
To some extent, in terms of serving others, I think it's very much a two-way street, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've sort of embraced this idea that in order for me to be a successful hospitality provider, I have to first make sure I'm providing hospitality for those that I see on a more daily basis, right? My
Yeah.
team.
That's really good.
And so there's been, I think, a bigger weight that a lot of restaurateurs and owners have taken on, where it's like, hey, I got to make sure my team is feeling just as well as I feel, right? They've got to feel safe coming back to work or doing what it is that they're doing. In addition to my guests that I maybe see on a transit basis. So I think there's a lot of emphasis being put on the restaurant team member or the hospitality quote-unquote worker, where their safety, their well-being, their just overall desire to continue to work in this business is elevated, which is a great thing, to be completely honest with you. For a very long time, working in a restaurant, hasn't been the most ideal setting for a lot of people, right?
No, I was going to say, it sounds like those problems have existed already,
Yeah.
but now the shift has changed where it's like, okay, now we can address those things because now they're actually really important.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you tell me if I work in a restaurant that I'm going to spend, I don't know how many hours doing what it is that I do, and if for some reason there's like very little benefits, if something does go wrong, my health is in jeopardy, it's like, okay, well, these are solutions and there are answers to these problems that exist in other industry. Why don't they exist here for a business or an industry that employs 11.1 million people in the private sector? Now, as an operator, you have to think and say, what can I do to make sure that my team is set up for success,
Right.
So they could better do their job and have a more significant impact.
That's such a good way to look at things. What about with reopening now? How is that going to look?
You sort of find and look for the opportunity to reinvent yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think it's been like throughout even just the beginning of this conversation, like very inspiring the way that you talk about the hospitality industry, because in the news you just see like all of the bad news and how hard this is and how companies are struggling, which as you mentioned like is very true and is the reality. But I think it's really inspiring the hope that you've been having throughout all of this. I want to hear more maybe about like what God's been revealing to you through
Sure.
this.
I think it's really allowed me to tap into, I don't want to say my creative genius, but more so his creative genius, right?
Love that.
Where we the hospitality world historically has been very straight, this is what we do and this is how we do things. And we do it this way because someone told me that's how we do it. We're just gonna keep doing it the same way. And so for me, I've been able to spend a lot of time with my creator and just say, hey, how do you want me to sort of navigate through these unprecedented waters?
Absolutely.
And in that space, it's unlocked some sort of unique imagination that perhaps I never knew I had. And just said, here are ways that you could still practice hospitality. Maybe it's just not in the way that you have historically done it.
Sure.
And I've loved every moment of that because it does get me out of the traditional space of being in a dining room and saying that this is what we do and say, this is what hospitality can look like for the next 10, 15, 20 years, right?
Wow.
And introduce new practices that make our world a little bit more easier to exist in.
Yeah, I feel like as like a fellow creative, the mind works in such a crazy way where the task at hand starts to relate to like your personal philosophy or what's happening in your own brain and spirit. How have you been personally changed by this with the shift in hospitality, even if it seems unrelated?
So you mentioned sort of my relationship with Lululemon. I have this idea that I'm an athlete. I'm not,
Right.
but I think I am.
Sure.
That's just sort of the role I play.
It's the identity.
Right, exactly, right. Sometimes as an athlete, right, you might get like an injury or something might happen. It might be sidelined for like a few weeks. And I've realized in sort of my athletic journey that those moments where you experience injury, it sometimes can be traumatized, but oftentimes it's just an opportunity for you to work on the weaknesses or imbalances that you had which caused that injury.
Wow.
Right? So you take a moment to sit down, reflect, and rebuild, and you actually come back stronger and better off than you ever were.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
so
wow.
that's sort of how I relate my time, how I do things.
Absolutely. Those weaknesses are sometimes really hard to like uncover
Exactly,
and then
right?
recover
You gotta face it,
from.
right? You gotta face it, right? When I first started running, I used to have chronic hamstring pulls. And I was like, why do I keep pulling my hamstrings? It was like, okay, you just need to get stronger. They just gotta be stronger. But every time it's happened, it's allowed me to come back as a better athlete, and my performance has gone through the roof. So I think if you treat it as such, where, hey, we're making a shift here, let's find some innovative ways so we could come back as a better industry, a better business, to better serve our 11.1 million team members, right? In addition to the guests that we see on a daily basis, will be a better solution for them.
It's a lot of hands.
Yeah, it is.
So you guys have had to deal with obviously quarantine, the restrictions, complete uncertainty. That's our favorite word, right?
Yeah,
All
it's
the time. But shifting gears, on these interviews, we primarily talked with people about the COVID-19 quarantine. But more recently, obviously, we've experienced a major shift in our social climate. And I think we can agree that quarantine itself has placed us in a state of self-reflection, right? I feel like especially when people were first quarantined, I myself was able to go through a lot of self-reflection. As you were saying, uncovering those weaknesses. I think we've started to, through this piece, actually develop a lot of power.
Sure.
And then I think we're seeing that on a national and global level, obviously with like the tragedies with racial injustice. I think that's something that we've been able to see as not a personal problem, but like on a national and global level.
Yeah.
It's something of reflection where we realize we haven't dealt with this fully. And so I was just wondering, what are your feelings on that? Has that been a similar narrative in your mind?
100%. I mean, to your point, it's like, let's uncover some problems, right? And it's a big problem that we've sort of tried to ignore and maybe just not give attention to.
Yeah.
But in order for us to move forward, you have to deal with it, right? Or you could try to keep pushing it aside, but it's only going to get worse. Right. And if I look at sort of the timeline of shelter in place to now being forced to deal with the current climate, right? It's like deal with these things so you can move forward. If not, I don't know what's gonna happen, right? I don't want to paint like this more picture, but like it's like just deal with it, figure it out. We've spent a lot of time reflecting ourselves inward. Now let's look at these massive problems that we as Americans deal with, and even on a global scale, right? These are human problems, these are world problems. Yeah. Let's figure this out so we can move forward as a better people.
Sure. And I think like it's so crazy. I think we have people standing on all sides of the spectrum, people who are aware of these problems, significantly aware of these problems, and people who just weren't at all. So I think the fact that they're being uncovered is very interesting, and I think that I'm seeing people actually change their opinion on things, which is wild. Have you seen any of that in your industry, in your personal life?
I have. For me, a question I've asked myself, and oftentimes that peers and colleagues of mine and sort of forums that exist in, is like, if you don't think racism exists, ask yourself why, and you might uncover a unique truth. And I'm happy to have that conversation, right? And I think for me, in my world, the role I've played in a lot of different restaurants and hospitality, is that it's generally my responsibility to run towards problems, right? Tyrone, the toilet's overflowing. Oh my gosh, I can't just go figure it out, right? You gotta run to it and figure it out.
There you go.
And I think that's how we have to deal with these world problems. And historically, we haven't, because these are some ugly truths, right? It's uncomfortable. It's not easy to talk about these topics. But at the end of the day, it's up to us to deal with them, right? This is the world that we live in.
Yeah.
This is what we got, right?
Right. Well, I feel like it's such a, like you said, uncomfortable place where, especially as a believer, right? So we have faith in God, we'll stand by that, and then quarantine happens. It's like, okay, let's navigate fear and address fear in our own lives. And then obviously being like a Black person in this world now, it's like, okay, so I'm a Christian in quarantine. I have to remain hospitable to everybody because of my position. What has that been like for you? What's the struggle?
Yeah, it's
I'm sure that hasn't been the easiest.
It's a weight, it's a responsibility, but I look at it where, as you mentioned, our creators put us on this earth for a reason, right? And in that understanding, I think there's a tremendous amount of power that you realize that you have, right? You have power to make change, to impact, to influence, and so don't shy away from that, because if you do, there's one less light that's not visible to those who sort of exist in darkness. And so my headset has just been to be a light, right? To do whatever I can in my small role that I play and the people that I have an opportunity to walk and talk with, to show them sort of the way of the kingdom, if you will. That's my headset in the professional setting, but also in my personal world.
It's a great responsibility to uphold.
There are moments where I'm like, okay, I'm tired, I just want to go to bed and I don't want to deal with this, but if I don't, then
I definitely feel the exhaustion, not to your level, but
no, I mean, we all share this. That's the thing, it's a shared responsibility.
That's so crazy. How have you been able to remain hopeful in these times? Because you seem like a positive guy through all this.
I am. I work in restaurants. You have to. Right. It's like everything always goes wrong, right? I live in Chicago where it snows and then it rains and then it's 95 degrees and it's all that.
It's been 3 days.
Right.
Yeah. All seasons.
And
right
so
here.
you just learn to deal with it. My hope obviously comes from my Creator and my faith, right? That this will all work out and we'll be victorious and triumphant in everything that we do. And so it's holding on to that. It's also understanding that I look at sort of the personal battles that I face, and I'm still here, right? And actually, I'm doing pretty okay. So if that's good to hear. I have to quantify that and say, hey, God, He's in control of everything. Right? He knew we would be here. This is no surprise to Him. And so my hope truly comes from Him. And then I also see, as you mentioned, the changes that you've seen in some people. I've seeing that in my world too.
Right.
And it's like, because of that, right? That's why we can't stop, and that's why my
Absolutely.
hope is on another level, right? And
There's like a new level of endurance I'm even seeing
Yeah.
in people, like just through the protest. I personally never seen anything of this scale.
No,
in my
no.
life.
It's wild. I was thinking of my dad, who experienced some of the riots of like the 60s and
Wow.
everything in between. He plays unique roles. Was 25 plus years with the Illinois State Police, and my younger brother is in law enforcement. I'm the only Redic man that is not in law enforcement. And so my interaction has always been unique and different. But I mean, he's still here, and he's like, "Hey, we dealt with some crazies, but I dealt with some crazies on a personal level. You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And keep moving, keep your faith, maintain that. In fact, get radical with it, go crazy.
Wow. That's a cool thing to hear from Dad.
Yeah, but just maintain that belief.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, looking towards this next season, what do you see? Like casting vision here.
Oh, I'm pumped up. I'm super optimistic. I have a belief that we're going to exist and live in a world that was better than we knew it months ago.
I agree.
I believe that we're going to see creative thought and ingenious ideas that will come from the church and the kingdom that we've really never experienced and seen before. And I think through that there'll be some amazing breakthrough. So I'm personally excited. Yeah, I think the city of Chicago is going to be a tremendous light.
That's good to hear.
I think Oasis Church will be a strong.
Man, let's go.
Right?
I believe it for sure.
Will represent that light in a big way. I'm also looking for more human connection too.
Wow.
I think if we for the last few weeks, we embraced this idea called social distancing, which is crazy to think about it. And I think we're going to hopefully my thoughts, embrace this idea of social connection, whatever it looks like, in different unique ways, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I have some dear friends that live in Milan, and I've chatted more with them simply because maybe an opportunity, but than I've ever done in my entire life.
Wow.
And realizing the world is a fairly small place.
Yeah.
I want it to be. So
It shifts your perspective on who you actually want to talk with, and it gives you that availability.
this is true.
That's really cool. That's really encouraging for me, especially.
Yeah.
I'm hoping for that social connection.
Yeah, right. Social distancing was the thing. Let's embrace social connection. Right? Maybe
Yeah.
let's pump that up.
Yeah, well, and I think too, just through this all kind of what you had said at the beginning, like I just think with so many changes that we've seen, like hearts have been changing, like minds have been changing. God has been working in people in situations like never before. So I'm just also so hopeful to see like what comes on the other side of all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, we represent the light of the world, so let's
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
thank you. This has been incredible.